Coming up on the world today, Europeans asked to wear masks for family members this holiday season. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson wants the European Union to see sense and agree a post-Brexit trade deal. Plus, a Category 5 storm is headed towards the Fiji Islands within days. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. Many Europeans already know they will be spending the Christmas season indoors this year, but not without some advice from the World Health Organization. The Global Health Agency is calling on people in Europe to keep their masks on during family gatherings for the sake of their families. This comes as countries around the world register thousands of daily cases and hundreds of deaths. Here's more in our Global Update.
Schools and non-essential businesses will remain shut in Germany until January 10 in an attempt to stop a sharp rise in COVID-19 infections. Christmas will see a slight ease-in, with one household allowed to host up to 4 close family members. Just over a week before Christmas, pubs and restaurants in London have shut their doors amid worsening coronavirus figures. The new lockdown is met with mixed views.
Yeah, I think it is a good idea if it keeps people safe and, protects people going back for Christmas from kind of infecting their families and stuff. I think it's got to be done.
I don't think anyone really knows what's going on, to be honest. If the cases are up, I suppose we've got to do something.
Why do you think it's a bad idea? I think the whole thing's a bit of a farce. I think it's too much now. I think things have got to move on now, get back to normal.
The British government plans to relax restrictions for 5 days around Christmas, allowing members from 3 households to mix.
As I say, unanimous agreement across all the UK government, across all the devolved administrations, including members of all parties, Mr. Speaker, including his own, that we should proceed in principle with the existing regulations, Mr. Speaker, because we don't want to criminalise people's long-made plans, Mr. Speaker, but we do think it's absolutely vital that people should, at this very, very tricky time, exercise a high degree of personal responsibility, especially when they come into contact with elderly people, and avoid contact with elderly people wherever possible. And that is how, by being sensible and cautious, not by imposing endless lockdowns or cancelling Christmas.
Parisians are heading home a little earlier today amid an 8 p.m. curfew. The number of people admitted to hospital for COVID-19 in France resumed its decline on Tuesday, ending 3 straight days of increases as the country replaced a second national lockdown with a nightly curfew. Authorities say anyone found breaking the curfew is liable to a €135 fine. And finally, Europeans are set to start getting coronavirus vaccines before the new year. The European Medicines Agency says an expert panel would convene on Monday, December the 21st, to evaluate the vaccine made by US company Pfizer and German partner BioNTech.
The viewers, Henry Widgwell joins us now from London. Henry, thanks for joining us. I guess the theme for today should be reclaiming Christmas. It appears it's going to be a somewhat gloomy one across Europe. What's the light in the tunnel here for those feeling down and out about the whole situation?
I guess the light at the end of the tunnel is that that vaccine that you've spoken about is already being delivered and being administered in the United Kingdom. So far, the government says 187,000 doses of that Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine have been given out to the most vulnerable groups. That's the clinically vulnerable, the over 80s, and also frontline health. And 4 million of those vaccine doses are being made available before the end of the year. The British government says it hopes that the full order of 40 million doses will be in place by the spring, and life may be back to normal by the summer. So that's the UK. As we've seen in your last report there, the European Union's Medicines Agency is bringing forward its meeting to approve the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to the 21st of December. So hopes being raised in Europe as well that the hundreds of million doses of the vaccine that they have ordered will be available before the end of the year, and the most vulnerable groups will begin to be inoculated as well. And of course, once you begin giving the vaccine to those older groups, to the older people, to more vulnerable people, then the pressure on the hospitals, the intensive care units decreases, and life can get back to some kind of normality. But many governments across Europe caution that that is still a long way off. There are many hurdles ahead. Infection rates are rising rapidly in countries across Europe. In Germany yesterday, we saw almost 1,000 deaths reported. That's the highest across the whole pandemic. The Italian government has said that it expects to report 700,000 total deaths from all causes so far this year. That's the highest number of deaths in the country since 1944, when fighting in the Second World War was at its peak. So that gives you some idea of how Europe is suffering at the moment. The only light at the end of the tunnel, as you put it, is the scientists, is those vaccine, Pfizer-BioNTech, the hopes that the Moderna vaccine and the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine may also be soon approved and being given out at clinics.
Yeah, and of course, yes, the vaccine being the way out, but still have to convince a lot of people to receive the vaccine. Interesting, however, is that more restrictions are being imposed in countries that have already spent months and weeks in lockdown. So how strict do you think authorities will be this time, making sure people in those countries adhere strictly to COVID-19 restrictions?
I think it's going to be very difficult to enforce it. The rules are stricter than the last round of lockdowns we saw in Europe in the autumn, but many authorities and police forces have said that they don't want to play the role of breaking up family gatherings over Christmas, or knocking on people's front doors on Christmas Day and trying to break up those family groups who perhaps have more than 5 people in the house, or are greater than 2 households mixing. I think most governments are not relying so much on enforcement as in the public realizing what's at stake here, realizing the seriousness of the situation, and hoping that they see that relief, those vaccines, are soon on the horizon. And so it might be worth just hanging on for a few more weeks. As one politician here in the United Kingdom put it, don't risk everything now when the cavalry has arrived on the horizon. Here in Britain, for example, the government has said it's not going to impose any stricter rules than it has already outlined, despite some scientists saying that it is time for those rules to get stricter. They're relying on public adherence to this, but it's not clear yet whether that will happen.
Henry, I'm supposed to let you go, but very quickly, could you just address this, how businesses hope to make the gains that they're supposed to, even during the COVID-19 lockdown this season?
Yes, well, it's a very difficult question. A lot of businesses are suffering incredibly during this pandemic. Just here in London, as of today, all non-essential businesses, and that includes pubs and restaurants, have been ordered to shut. They normally make most of their money this time of year, with people celebrating with office parties and the like. We've seen names like Debenhams and Topshop, 2 huge stores here in the UK. People used to do much of their Christmas shopping there in years gone by. They've gone bankrupt. And so the number of job losses is mounting. What we've seen is those businesses that have been able to survive and even thrive during the pandemic are those adapted to the modern world of retail, to online shopping, to deliveries, to remote shopping. And I think more and more businesses are realizing that they're going to have to take those steps to survive into the future.
Indeed, the most important thing this season is we have our health and we have our families. Henry, thanks again.
Thanks very much.
Many people around the world are still very skeptical about receiving the COVID-19 vaccine because of all of the conspiracy we're hearing and theories are flying around about it. It is possible for an illness, it is possible because an illness is an illness scientists are still trying to understand. But one man remembers being the first to receive the polio vaccine when he was a young boy. Years later, he says he's not afraid of taking the COVID vaccine. Dr. Larry Mollick was only 6 there in the video when he received a polio vaccine as one of the first kids in the New York City area back in May of 1955.
So I was 1955, May of 1955, and I was chosen, and I don't remember how or why, but I was chosen to be one of two children to accept the polio vaccine that was arriving, I think from Chicago actually, into LaGuardia, New York. It was the first shipment ever of polio vaccine that had been long awaited because polio was a terrible epidemic, especially for children my age. And back in 1955, risky to take a vaccine because there wasn't as much oversight in the development of vaccines. And because of there were certain issues with the polio vaccine in those days, there were further government regulations to control the science and the approval of any future vaccines, which again makes this vaccine, in my mind, totally safe to take.
Let's turn now to the European Union. Chief Ursula von der Leyen says she cannot say if there would be a trade accord between the EU and Britain. She can't confirm, though, that there has been progress over the last few days, but the next few would be very critical. Both sides have been trying to clinch a deal that would govern nearly $1 trillion in annual trade before informal membership known as the transition period, which ends on December 31st.
There is a path to an agreement now. The path may be very narrow, but it is there. And it is there for our responsibility to continue trying. The good news is that we have found a way forward on most issues. But this is now a case of us being so close and yet being so far away from each other. Because two issues still remain outstanding, you know them, the level playing field and the fisheries. Now, first on the level playing field. Our aim is simply to ensure fair competition on our own market. Very simple. And this is why we need to establish robust mechanisms. The architecture we're working on rests on two pillars, state aid and standards. On state aid, we have made progress based on common principles, guarantees of domestic enforcement, and the possibility to autonomously remedy the situation where needed. On standards, we have agreed a strong mechanism of non-regression. That's a big step forward. And this is to ensure that our common high labor, social and environmental standards will not be undercut.
Grazie, Presidente.
For the British Prime Minister, he hopes the EU would see sense, he says, and agree a post-Brexit trade deal. He was addressing Parliament earlier today where he made the comment. He's confident, though, that the UK would prosper regardless of what its trading relation is with the EU.
Come on, Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, there's every opportunity, notwithstanding the slight air of, uncharacteristic air of gloom from the right honourable gentleman, there's every opportunity, every hope I have that our friends and partners across the Channel will see sense and do a deal. And all that takes is for them to understand that the UK has a natural right, like every other country, to want to be able to control its own laws and its own fishing grounds, which ought to be important, I would have thought, to the right honourable gentleman. But whatever happens in the next few days, I know that this country will prosper mightily on the terms that we agree with our European friends, whatever they may be, whether they're Australian or Canadian. He can go forward with a high heart and confidence into 2021, knowing there are great opportunities for Scotland and the rest of the UK.
Coming up after the break on The World Today. And we always talk about understanding animals. What about animals understanding us? Not talking about cats and dogs here. We're already used to it. But what about kangaroos? Stay with us. Welcome back. It's staying in the EU, but in another development, the European Parliament has given leading Belarusian political figures, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, the Human Rights Prize. It was made in support of the country's protest against the results of the August presidential election that the West and the opposition say was rigged. Receiving the award, Tsikhanouskaya said Europe should be braver in its support for the Belarus opposition.
For the third time in 20 years, Belarusians have been honored with the Sakharov Freedom of Thought Prize. What is a better recognition that we are free thinkers? What is a better motivation for us to keep going? We are bound to win, and we will win. But we are not alone here today. Beside us are thousands of Belarusians who inspire us, give us strength and hope. Many of them are not here today. Our courage, women, workers, students, doctors, teachers, lawyers, writers, journalists and activists, of all them are in Belarus fighting for our freedom. It is to them that this prize belongs.
Neighboring Russia has rejected findings of a joint media investigation that said it had identified Russian state security assassins as being behind the poisoning of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, describing it as an amusing read. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was reacting to the report during a press conference earlier today, during which he blamed the United States and other Western countries for being behind the investigation and the outcome. The investigation was carried out by Bellingcat Russian media outlets The Insider in cooperation with CNN and the German news magazine Der Spiegel. The Kremlin has repeatedly rejected any suggestion that Russian authorities try to kill Navalny, one of President Vladimir Putin's most prominent critics. Now, a French court has found guilty 14 accomplices of the attackers behind the January 2015 attacks on the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo and a Jewish supermarket in Paris. Now, among the 14 was Hayat Boumediene, a former partner of Ahmedi Coulibaly, who killed a policewoman, and then 4 people in the Jewish market. 17 people were killed during 3 days of bloodshed that marked the beginning of a wave of Islamist violence that was to leave scores more dead. On January 7, 2015, the brothers Said Said and Sharif Kouachi went on a gun rampage in the offices of Charlie Hebdo, a weekly whose cartoons on race, religion, and politics tested the limits of what society would accept in the name of free speech. They killed 12 people. China says it will open itself wider to the rest of the world and create more opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation among countries so as to make greater contribution to the stability and prosperity of the post-pandemic world. A Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Wang Wenbin, made the comment during a press briefing. It follows a statement by the Ministry of Commerce on Tuesday that foreign direct investment into Chinese mainland in actual use expanded 5.5% year-on-year to 98.7 billion won. In November, making the 8th consecutive month that the country witnessed FDI growth. Many foreign media and institutions believe that China's economic growth trend is conducive to the recovery of the world economy in the fallout from the COVID pandemic. Wenbin says since the beginning of the year, China has implemented the foreign investment law and the rules for its practical application on a full scale. So a devastating storm is headed towards Fiji and is expected to land within days. The government has closed schools and urged people to stock up on emergency supplies. Cyclone Yasser, a Category 5 storm, the highest category, is expected to bring high-speed winds and torrential rain across Fiji's 2 largest islands when it makes landfall on Friday. Researchers in Australia believe kangaroos can learn to understand human beings the same way dogs and cats do. They're currently doing a study involving 11 kangaroos that live in captivity but have not been domesticated. They noticed 10 of the 11 marsupials intently gazed at researchers when they were unable to open a box with food. 9 alternately looked at the human and the container as a way of pointing or gesturing towards the object.
The little task, the experimental task itself is quite simplistic, but nevertheless it was important to carry it out using a wild species, a truly wild species like kangaroos. And much to our surprise, they did show the gazing behavior and the gaze alternations that are usually associated with domestic animals. So it shows that this effect of trying to deliberately communicate with a human is not really restricted to the usual domestic species that we know. And it was fantastic to find that this actually occurs in kangaroos.
What is Christmas without the scene of the Nativity? The pandemic raging across the earth has got everyone being implored to do what's best to keep safe, washing their hands, maintaining social distancing, and wearing of face masks. That excludes no one and maybe nothing, including the Nativity. In Bolivia, where a popular tradition in the Latin American nation is to feature an adorned statue of the baby Jesus in homes, complete with accessories such as an elaborate bassinet, even the baby Jesus is seen wearing a mask. This year, people are kind of being encouraged to customize face masks and bedazzled shield for their baby Jesus figurines, even a made-to-measure Hamzat suit included. And Jesus' new accessories are proving a hit with faithful, many who believe that a well-protected baby Messiah will also keep the household safe. And when Sora Wood Kitty Banthorne was looking for new types of waste to recycle, the then London-based student was drawn to the millions of tons of chicken feathers being discarded each year. Now back in his homeland of Thailand, the 30-year-old is seeking funding to continue his research into how best to convert the nutrient component found in the feathers into powder that can then be transformed into a lean, protein-rich source of edible food. Indeed, the potential appears huge, given the Sorowat reckons that about 2.3 million tons of feathers are being dumped in Europe alone each year. With a generally higher poultry consumption in Asia, he believes there could be up to 30% more feather waste than could be exploited in the region. Surawat, who studied for a Masters of Material Futures in London, said the idea still needs to go through other research and development phases, but prototypes, including his take on chicken nuggets and a steak substitute, have received positive reviews from some.
I feel like the texture, the fatty, the juicy and everything, it really gave me the feeling that I'm really eating the real meat, like the real red meat. This is actually my first time, having the alternative food source or something that made from this chicken feather. And it's, like the weight and the texture that, when I first tried it comes with not that lightweight like you imagine about the chicken feather. So I think it would be something that very interesting for people to try. The texture is very complex and advanced. It's something that you would never imagine that chicken feather would be able to improvise into this kind of dish. And I really could imagine this serving to me in some Michelin star or some fine dining experience. I can really imagine it serving one day.
Welcome to the future, everyone, where foods will be made in the lab. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.